Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Chess Advanced, and I'm continuing with the series of FIDE Olympiad games of Gukesh, and this is actually round four, and I think they're facing Iceland. Sorry, not Iceland. Actually, they're playing Serbia, and we have with the white pieces actually Alexander Predke, a very strong Serbian grandmaster, and with the black pieces we have current reigning world champion. So this game is going to be very interesting. Here, Alexander Predke starts with e4. We have c6, and just going for d4 and d5, going for the Caro-Kann defense, and this game is going to be an absolute grind. So bear with me. I'll try to take you along through it, and we'll analyze it together. Just e captures, c captures, bishop to d3, but just knight to c6, c3, queen to c7, h3, and here just knight to f6. This is all main standard theory. Here knight to f3, g6, and just is knight to a3 just is a move like, when you want to surprise your opponent. Normally it's just castle, you just play rook here, knight here, you can just jump in here, and most likely bishop, queen, and that's how the game goes, because here after a6 we have knight to c2, here just going for bishop to f5, asking for a bishop trade. Well, you could trade and ruin the pawn structure early on, or you could just wait and lose the bishop pair early on. Here bishop captures, g captures, and it seems like okay should be a little bit afraid because of his strong pawn structure, but most likely he's going to be castling queenside, or just king is going to remain in the center. You could also play a move like e6 and strengthen your position, so anything is possible. Castles e6, and now just going for this knight c to e1, bishop to d6, but just going for this knight to d3, knight to e4, bishop to h6. Now you're not going to be castling kingside ever again. Rook to g8, but now just going for this queen to c1, and now as planned, castling queenside. Looks a bit scary, almost a semi-open file here, but you have to be a little bit careful here as Gukesh, because but still at the end of the day you can play a few prophylactic moves. You have to understand that dark square bishop is still a thing, so you might have to make two prophylactic moves. Bishop to f4, here just going for this f6, and just bishop captures, rook captures, and now just going for this queen to f4, but just knight to e7. And both players are maybe just gonna trade queens, and could be a battle in the center, but I think most likely the battle is gonna commence on the g file, because that's the only open file and black is currently holding it, and Gukesh is not going to accept a loss here. I don't think he's going to accept even a draw here in this position. He has to win. He has to win it for India. I think that's the mindset he's going in, and he's not accepting a draw under any circumstances, because the player that he's playing with is roughly 200 rated below than him. So definitely you're going to try your absolute best to be able to win this game. Here rook a to c1 was played, but just knight to g6, queen to h2, but now just rook to c6, asking for a queen trade. Queen captures, king captures, and now just going for rook f to e1, king to d6, king to f1. Might seem like this rook is a little bit misplaced, but then you can understand that you can get this rook here and just put a lot of pressure, just play all of these moves once the position allows it. But at the at here, nothing is here misplaced, but the game is most likely ending towards a draw. But well, if it was a draw, I wouldn't be showing this game to you, so I think well, you can guess the rest of it. a5, but now just g4, f captures, h captures, but now just going for a4. We have a3, knight to e7, g5, f captures, knight to e5, and just going for rook c to c8. f3, just going for knight to d2 check, king moves, and now just getting the other knight into the game as well. And this knight can always come here, and even if you just capture, you can just push, and you'll have a very nice pawn structure here. And most likely it's still going to be a draw, but then again, I already told you. We have rook to c2, knight to b3, rook c to e2, rook to c7, and just knight to g4. And now you always have to be a little bit mindful, because once these rooks double, once these pawns are pushed, your king is still here, and it's not a good sign, because rook to e7, king to h1, rook to h1, knight to h4, and now somewhere you feel like if this was possible, I think this would be very good if you could get the knight here, but it's just very much difficult. King to g3, h5, and now the knight has to run away. Knight to f5 check, king moves, and what do you play here in this position? I'm gonna ask you to pause the video and try and find out the only winning move, or only move in this position for black that gives him a little bit of advantage, that gives Gukesh a little bit of an edge in this position that he's been looking for the entire game. So have at it. So congratulations to everyone who's able to find this move, and the move is well, not this, but actually this. And once you push that pawn, and slowly but surely it will all make sense, because here now you have to play rook h to e1. just trying to see a play a waiting move, because if you push it all the way, then you have to understand it becomes a little bit weak. You won't be able to defend it that much, and if you're not able to defend it, black is going to capture it. White is going to capture it, and white is going to be a pawn up. So knight to g3 first, now attacking the rook. Only now once the rook moves, you try to tease white a little bit, but here after this, knight to h5, the knight is jumping there, and rook to g1, but knight e to g7. We have rook to g4, knight to f6, attacking the rook. Rook moves, and now here rook to f8. Now you can see that all of this is going to be a preparation for actually that check. Rook back to e1, but now this comes as knight to e4 check, king to g1, and knight to g3. That knight is an absolute monster there, and is going to be a very, very strong piece, and this is the piece that you want to have if you want to win the game. And after king to h2, slowly slowly, very slowly, you're going to have to make some progress here. As soon as the knight moves, you want to trade that knight, and maybe, just maybe, push all those pawns all the way, and that's the game for you. But yeah, it's very difficult, very, very difficult to find this move and understand why it wins. It's it took me even very very, very high analysis and very high engines to be able to understand this. I was not able to find this move myself, obviously. But here after king to f2, Gukesh does not find it. Gukesh played rook to h7, and the idea behind rook to h7 is just simply this only, but just so that it happens a little bit faster. And engine does not hate this move. As you can see, it's the second best move. But here after rook to g1, now you play rook g to g7, and you have doubled up in a weird way. But king to e1, king to e7, and rook to g2. And now what are you doing? How are you defending that pawn? But here just king to f6, and everything is defended here. No checks aside from actually no checks here in this position, so you cannot do anything. King to e2, but just p6, knight to c6, and now just going for this knight to d6, knight c to e5, and just going for this knight to e5, just trying to remaneuver that knight. And both knights would be just facing each other in a diagonal manner. uh, Rook to h2, but just knight a to c4, rook e to g1. I'm trying to put some pressure here, but you just push it h4. And I think maybe now I'm starting to just realize a little bit that why h4 did make sense in that position. But h4 is a commitment that you have to understand, because then you have to play this endgame according to this design only, and then you have to understand that the knight is supposed to be on g3, and realizing that is very crucial in that line. So I think it's not just about the pattern, it's not just about that rook will attack it, so I'll push it, but it's just about that how you're going to win it, and if you have a definitive plan to actually cater to black white's actual attack. So here after king to f2, we have king to e7, rook to g2, knight captures on e5, and here after knight captures, knight to f5, and this knight is absolutely amazing. Can jump to very amazing squares and putting pressure on a lot of those squares. Rook to e1, rook to h8, and now just going for rook to g1, rook to f8. Now the structure that I told you about is almost very, very similar to the engine structure that we had roughly 30 moves ago. So now it's starting to all make sense. Rook g to e2, king to d6, but the king to g2, knight to g3, and now we have knight rook to e3, knight to h5, and now just king to h2, king to c7, rook to b1, and now just finally getting the knight to f6, king to h3, knight to e8, and now just rook to g1. So white is just here waiting and asking Gukesh, if do you have a winning plan? If yes, then go for it. And Gukesh goes knight to d6, rook to g4, b5, but now just comes this rook to e2, knight to c4, king to g2, and just king to d6. Slowly but surely, Gukesh is making progress. You have to understand Gukesh is now controlling a lot of squares, and these rooks are barely, I mean, barely, barely holding the position. And you don't want to trade, neither do you want to trade here, because you have to understand that once you trade here, then this is actually just becomes very, very weak. And with these two pawns pushing all the way, you just don't want to force your rooks to actually defend your weak backwards b2 pawn. And so knight to d3, but now just rook doubles on the f7 file, and now you have to defend this. But f4, and now f4 is a move that you should not be playing, but your opponent goes for it, and Gukesh is happily going to take it. I think Gukesh's idea was to frustrate your opponent so much that they start to make mistakes. That's a very good idea. I play it against a lot of IMs, and I'm able to get some wins against an IM and GMs. So I understand that idea. G captures, king to f3, rook to f6, but just rook caps on h4, rook to g8, and now just going for this knight caps on f4. So it might seem like you have actually cobbled two of those pawns up. So what is Gukesh's idea here? Gukesh's idea is very simple. It is rook to g1, and now how do you hold this position? Rook to g4, rook to f1 check, king moves, and now just this e5. and that e5 thrust is the one that was supposed to be, because you understand that white didn't have any pressure here against that weak backwards e6 pawn, and now you have to understand that it's been pushed, and how do you deal with this? D captures, but now just knight captures, attacking the rook. Rook moves, and now we have this very nice rook to g1 check. Knight blocks, but now just knight to c4. Rook to h5, king to c6, and just rook to h2. It's only about time where the position, white's position, absolutely collapses, because you have an outside pawn. All of your pieces are crumbled together, trying to protect you, and that's what I was wondering. That's what I was thinking about, because I told you in the beginning itself, these pawns are not going to be good enough, because you have to understand both of those rooks were actually eyeing your king. It was not the pawns, it was the your king that was the problem at that time. King to c5, but just rook to h5, and now just king goes back, rook to h8, and now rook to b1. Now how do you, what is the defense here? There's absolutely none. Knight to f4, but now just going for rook captures. Rook checks, but rook blocks, and now you have double up in black's camp. So what do you do? How do you actually get out of checks in this position? Well, Gukesh does it very nicely. Knight to d6, and now you have a fork, so you have to give checks to be able to get out of it. So rook check, king moves, and now just waiting and see what Gukesh will do. But just rook to a2, and now you're gonna win those pawns as well. Rook to a8, but now just rook caps on a3. Knight to e2, but now just comes king moves forward. Rook to d7, trying to go for check this way, but now just knight to e4. King moves, and now just rook blocks. So there are no checks in this position now. You are absolutely lost. 3 to 1 advantage. That pawn is going to fall soon enough. King to f4, but just knight caps on c3. If you trade, you're lost. So here just king to c4 was played, and after an 85 move grind, Gukesh was able to absolutely execute his idea. And the idea leveled around the fact, not h4, but idea leveled around the fact that your king is a bit too weak. I have a king which is on a safe square. I'm going to get my rooks here, and slowly but surely I'm going to exchange all of those pawns, not take your pawns and not push those pawns to victory, but exchange all of your pawns, and I'm going to get rid of my weak pawn. I'll have a d pass pawn, and slowly but surely I'll get my rooks into the game. And once I do, I'm going to gobble up all your pawns, and now we're going to be shifting games towards the queen side, and actually push this pawns to victory. So thinking like that, saying things like that, you must be thinking that obviously he didn't calculate it all the way through. But you cannot say that that was not his plan all along, because that's what he had been doing ever since his opponent played f4, and that was the plan all along after f4. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll be coming back with games like these, so stay tuned to the channel, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be seeing you guys very, very soon. Thank you all.